Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, bringing you another guides, tips, and tricks video. This time we're talking about Battle Brothers. The goal of this particular video is to help facilitate the new player experience. If you are a totally new player to the game, never opened the game before, or if you are a fairly new player to the game, you've opened it but you're not entirely sure what's going on, this guide video may be beneficial for you, and it's certainly geared towards you. If you're an expert player, I expect future guide videos may be useful to you, but this is really geared towards a new player. So let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about what the game is. It is a sandbox, turn-based, squad-based strategy game with a focus on leading a mercenary company. That's the premise of the game. You are a mercenary commander. You will be managing the resources of your company, the money, the food, the men that you have in your company, the mood of your men, the contracts you're going to be taking, the ammunition that you have available to your team, and as part of that, you're going to be doing things like deciding on the stat allocations and level ups of your men, the perks and specializations that they become, the faction that you align yourself with, whether or not you're going to be a bandit mercenary group or a legitimate mercenary group. Do you want to focus on running the missions set up by the factions, or if you want to be just kind of an adventurer wandering around the map, busting camps and whatnot. You make all these decisions as the controller of this group. The setting is medieval low fantasy with a German mythology background. So this is things like swords, shields, spears, bows, but no gunpowder of any sort. You'll be wearing plate mails and scale mails and this type of thing. You will not have access to magic yourself, but the world you're in has some element of magic in it. You'll be fighting things like undead, zombies, ghouls, orcs, goblins, other human factions, both nobles and brigands, this type of thing. The game really focuses on a diverse experience, and it's a sandbox game, so you have a lot of control over what that looks like. There are a large number of different types of fights available. The bulk of the game will be you controlling your men in combat. You can have up to 12 of your own men and up to like 50 of the opposing forces on the field at any given time. And you'll be controlling the armaments that your guys are equipped with, the gear they have, the formations to a lesser degree, how they deploy, and then all the actions they have in combat. And collecting both more gear, money, reputation, and otherwise doing what you want and in a sandbox game. There is some guidance. You have short-term goals called ambitions that the game will prompt you for across the course of the game, as well as what are called crises in this game, which are kind of directed focuses. There's an undead crisis, a greenskin crisis, and a noble war crisis, where the focus if you choose to interact with that crisis for that period of time, will be based around some external important event like the ones we just talked about. But by and large, you are wandering a world, fighting these creatures of your choice and doing kind of what you want along the way for that. What really brings me back to this game again and again, I'm at like 700 hours, is the perk system, the leveling system for your characters, and the fights. Those are really what I love about this game. It's a very diverse perk system. There's a lot of builds that are very effective. There's a lot of cool things you can do with your guys. The specialization is really, really fun for me. And the fighting is just so fun. It's such a good combat system in this game. That's really what I love about this game. So if you like turn-based combat, this game is awesome for you. This is something you might enjoy. All right, so that's basically what the game is about. That's the raw kind of, well, what is Battle Brothers? Let me do just two things past that. The first is I want to set you guys up a campaign. The second is I want to show you the graphics of the game, because both of those were things that were impactful for me. All right, so let's set up a new campaign together. The company name is just what you'd like to call it. It has no other impact than that. The flag is just what you're going to show on the minimap. It also has no other impact past that. Do what you want for those. The late game crisis option, as I said, late game is really misleading here. It's not late game at all. The way this game works is there's no end to this game unless you want there to be an end. So late game is straight up subjective there. But even in kind of the most loose thought of late game, the first crisis you face will not be late game. So the crises will go in, it's not order, but you can either go random, in which case it will be random order, or you can pick the first crisis you get. The first crisis probably shows up somewhere around day 80, roughly. And after you complete that crisis, there'll be a period of time where there's no crisis, and then another crisis will occur. It can't be the same crisis back to back, but and it will cycle through all three of them before it resets. But you could have 3 Noble War crises, 3 Greenskin Invasion crises, and 3 Undead Scourge crises in a game if you played long enough. So all this little button here does is determine which one is the first one you encounter. As a new player, it doesn't make any difference. The Undead Scourge is probably the easiest early game crisis, so if you want an easier experience, you may pick that, but it really doesn't matter that much. All right, Permanent Destruction. Permanent Destruction interacts with the minimap, not the minimap, the world map rather, in a way. During these crises, Greenskin and Undead crises anyways, towns on the map can be destroyed. Towns are a source of people for recruiting, of resources in terms of your gear, like tools and supplies, food, and ammunition and weapons, and a place to sell the loot that you accumulate as you wander around this map. If you have permanent destruction enabled, you can lose access to those sites. Defending towns is part of what you're going to be doing in this game, but sometimes the behavior can be a little bit wonky. Towns can die very, very quickly, and they can be in positions where you really can't get to protect them sometimes. So as a new player, I recommend removing permanent destruction. As it is, you'll still be punished if you lose towns. They will be temporarily gone, but they will eventually come back, which means that you won't ruin your entire game because you don't understand what's going on. I strongly recommend to begin with leaving permanent destruction off. For a map seed, the maps are going to be pretty much different every time you play them, unless you select an identical map seed. The fun of having the map seed as something you can interact with and change is that you can play the same map that a friend is playing, or play the same map that a streamer is playing, or play the same map that a YouTuber is playing. So if you want to go through and experience the campaign that I played, well, you're not going to make the same decisions as me, of course, but you can have at the very least the same layout of towns versus the wild. Just for some perspective on that, the bulk of the map is probably wild. That is, the bulk of the map isn't in isn't particularly close to towns, isn't particularly controlled by towns. So a large portion of your game will be wandering around far from civilization, fighting things out in the wilderness, and the map seed will impact that to some degree. So you don't need to really worry about this, but it is a fun feature if you want to have a similar type of layout experience as a friend or someone you're watching. All right, moving on. These are the first settings you're really going to have to worry about. I recommend this setup right here, as is right there for a new player. And I'll talk through why. We're going to start with economic difficulty. Economic difficulty basically determines the amount of grinding you have to do in this game. Your guys have a number of upkeep costs associated with them. They have their payroll. You have to pay them daily. They eat a certain amount of food daily, and you have to buy food. And they use both tools for repairing their gear after fights, and they use ammunition while they're in a fight, and you have to buy both of those. And those are your basic costs, not even touching on the more expensive, the larger costs of recruiting men and buying gear. So all the economic difficulty seems to do is impact the prices that you can sell at. So a lower economic difficulty means you can find higher prices to sell at more reliably, as well as change I believe it changes the upkeep cost of your guys. So basically, you're paying a little bit less in terms of the amount of money you pay for a guy and the amount per day you're going to have for him, and it is going to change the total number of these resources you can store. So you can have more tools accumulated on your party, on your mercenary group before you venture into the wild on a lower difficulty than you can on a higher difficulty, which means you're less tied to the towns. What this is for me essentially is the level of how grindy do I want the game to be. If I am playing on a higher difficulty level, higher economic difficulty level, it means I have to grind more missions before I can leave the areas around the towns, because I can't travel as far on the money I have before I run out of money, which means I have to get a bigger bankroll because I'm paying more money on higher difficulties. I prefer the freedom of a lower economic difficulty in terms of being able to move around the map and fight the content that I find interesting without being quite as restricted in how much grinding I have to do for money. I did play my first couple campaigns on expert difficulty, expert economic difficulty. The campaigns are totally playable and they're still very fun, but I found that I couldn't do as much exploration of the world as I wanted to, and I really enjoyed finding these deep, dark dungeons on the other side of the map and fighting the Black Monolith and this type of stuff, and I had to spend a lot more time grinding money on a higher economic difficulty than I did on a lower economic difficulty. The starting funds basically talks about how quickly the game gets going, in my opinion. A lot of the early game is going to be choosing the fights that you can potentially win, and that is going to be a function of both the gear you have, the levels on your guys, but also the number of guys you have. And if you start on a low starting funds difficulty, it will take you a little bit longer to get up to the max number of guys. It will take you a little bit longer to accumulate some really basic gear, and you'll basically have to take some weaker fights to begin with, and be a little bit more choosy about the fights you're taking to begin with to get to that element. This one is less impactful as a whole than the economic difficulty one, but I just like starting on high funds. It lets me get my group up to 12 so I can go fight all the battles that I want to fight as soon as possible, and that to me, and start leveling as many people as soon as possible, which is the fun part to me. I like the character development and the fights in this game. So something that makes that happen sooner for me is a positive experience for me. So I recommend high starting funds and beginner economic difficulty. Combat difficulty, I go the other way on this, and for the same reasons though, which is interesting. So I like the experience of a deep combat, of a game where the decisions I make for each of my characters has a set of results that I'm held accountable for, and that is a direct result of what I'm doing. I like it to be a game where every move matters, where everything I do is important to the outcome of the game. That's really what I'm looking for in that experience. And I think expert difficulty is probably the best way to have that. I also think it's the best way to learn, which is a bit strange, because what I find happens if you play on a lower difficulty, like beginner difficulty, the strategies that are going to get you through beginner difficulty fine won't work if you go on a harder difficulty. And what that means is you're learning strategies that are actually not good strategies that will hurt you when you up the difficulty to a higher difficulty. So I actually recommend you learn on the highest difficulty, get those strategies, those sound strategies growing, start that learning experience from a perspective of this is what I actually need to do to survive, this is what actually needs to happen so I can win these fights reliably without losing all my people, and just start on that experience. And of course, the late game stuff, you're going to want the expert difficulty because the combat does scale pretty well in this game, but you can get to points where it can get a little bit easy if you're not careful. So starting it on the most challenging mode, to me, has given the most rewarding long-term experience for me. So I recommend expert combat difficulty. All right, Iron Man mode, yes, no. The game is designed to be played on Iron Man, and I really do enjoy the element of the decisions you make are final. So if you make a stupid decision, you lose a guy, that's final because it's on Iron Man. I like that. I like that element of, oh man, this was a shitty RNG moment, and I got hit in the head twice with crossbows in a row, which is kind of rare, and I lost a guy from it, and that sucks. But it's Iron Man, and I got to live with that. And that's just part of the story that develops. It's part of, that's how one of my named members dies. He eats 2 crossbow bolts and is gone. It just happened in one of my campaigns. I just lost a very, very awesome hunter archer who died from double crossbow bolts, for example. I like that. But I can't recommend it for the first game you play. As a new player starting the game, I don't actually recommend the first game be Iron Man because there's a learning curve, and I'm going to help as much as I can with that learning curve, but a lot of the understanding of a lot of your success in a fight is going to come from your understanding of the game mechanics in that fight and the types of enemies you're going to be fighting and the best strategies for dealing with that. And until you have that knowledge, it's going to be really painful to take a fight and be like, oh, I didn't even understand that enemy could do that, and now he's done that and he's killed me with that, and I'm like, oh, I want to be able to load and have that fight again with that knowledge. So I really don't recommend for a starting player the Iron Man experience here, but I do recommend on your second or maybe your third campaign checking it out because I think it enhances the overall experience of the game, but isn't going to be really good for someone doing the learning. Okay, I don't want this video to go on much longer because I really just wanted this to be about the very, very intro part of the game. But I did just want to show you one last thing, is I want to show you the graphics of this game. For me, this was the first reason why I didn't play this game when it came out, were the graphics of the game. And I want to talk just a little bit about that, but first I want to show you them if you haven't seen them already. So this game is little bouncing heads. Your units do not have arms and they do not have legs. And the animations, you can see the movement animations and the attack animations are pretty limited. And amusingly, I actually don't find this game very ugly anymore. the graphics did grow on me quite a lot over time. I like them. I like that there are the things in this happen as you take wounds on characters. You can see, oh, this guy just missed. You can see the wounds visibly appear on them. You can see the deterioration of armor as it gets hit. The armor, you can see this guy, he's got a cut on his face and his armor's a little beat up as he's taken some damage, basically. You can see the blood on these guys' weapons because they've hit something. They've actually killed something, so their weapons are blooded. I do like the graphics of this game once I got playing, but initially it was really off-putting to me of these little bouncing heads with no arms and no legs. So I did just want to put that out there. If you can't get past these graphics, this may not be the game for you. But I couldn't get past these graphics to begin with, and I've now come back and spent 700 hours on this game and really, really, really enjoyed the gaming experience. And I initially didn't pick it up because of those graphics, and I could have been playing this game months and months earlier. So I did want to show you that as well in the very first video. All right, guys, I don't want to make this one too long. I'm going to be doing 2 other ones. I'm going to talk, I'm going to be talking about 2 other things in another intro guide video. I'm going to be talking about the basic combat system and the world map itself. So perhaps I'll pick this conversation up in those videos, but hopefully this initial one was a little bit helpful for a very new player looking at whether or not this game would be good for them. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you soon.